Okay, today on the channel, we are going to take a look at the finalized version of Arcadia Tenebra. And this is a game that we did take a look at, I think about 2 years ago as a prototype form. And that was kind of right in the middle of their first crowdfund, which failed. And then their second crowdfund, it did hit. Now, I was not a backer of this game, but the company did send me a copy as a thank you. And so I appreciate that. And I thought we could take a look at it today. It is a very interesting game. I enjoy it a lot. And I think that Arcadia Tenebra is the embodiment of two concepts that we in this space of the hobby talk about a lot. And that is one, the flawed gem, and two, the passion project. Arcadia Tenebra is a game that probably would not exist if not for the passion of the creators and the ability for them to get things funded on Kickstarter. This is a unique game. This is a game completely kind of out of left field that I cannot imagine a traditional publisher taking a chance on. It feels very indie in everything, even in the component quality. You will see in this very, very rare occasion, I have my cards sleeved. And that is because the cards are the thinnest cards I have ever seen in a game. And so I decided to sleeve my cards. I almost never sleeve my games. As a matter of fact, the only reason why I had these sleeves to begin with is that I am actually in the process of unsleeving the few games that I do have sleeved in order, and I was going to take them down to a Friday Night Magic meetup and just give the nice premium sleeves that I have away. Just I don't like the way that sleeved cards feel. I don't like the sharp corners and I don't like sleeved cards, but I wanted to sleeve this game just because everything is so thin. The box itself was not even in a shipping box. It was just wrapped in a whole bunch of bubble wrap and sent to me. And the box got completely demolished. Every corner was busted and it was kind of squished flat when it finally arrived. The rule books are just kind of stapled zines, like the kind that I have shown how to make on the channel before, and just kind of real thin paper. This whole game, everything about this game has an indie feel to it. And I'm so happy that a creator was able to get this game made. Now let's take a look at the page of creators. I am not going to pronounce any of their names. I am sorry. This is a Eastern European game, and so I do not know how to pronounce any of their names. But there is the Arcadia Tenebra team there. You can pause this and take a look at it. So this really is a passion project. It really is a labor of love. And it also is a very flawed gem. And this is a game that I do like. It does have some issues, and we'll talk a little bit about both of those things in this video. So Arcadia Tenebra is an adventure game. It's an adventure game set in the fictional city or the fictional land of Arcadia Tenebra. And this land exists somewhere on the border of the Ottoman Empire. And it is kind of a period piece. It's kind of steampunky. Nikola Tesla is a character in this game. As a matter of fact, you can head up to his laboratory up here in the north, and through a series of tests, you can unlock the ability to gain treasures from his laboratory that will help you. The main goal of the game, or the main plot of the game, is a murder mystery. So you have arrived in the city, and you find out through interacting with the local constable that there are a series of gruesome murders that have been happening around Arcadia Tenebra. And you, as a traveler, as a tourist, as an anti-hero, you volunteer to help solve the mystery. However, the point of the game is not to solve a mystery. This isn't like Clue. There isn't really a mechanism for you to even determine who the murderer is. The murderer will basically always be the same. You will always be playing through the story of the of the murderer. So point A and point Z will always be the same in this game. You will always end up at the same point. However, all of the things in between those 2 points, that's where the variety is. And you will have different opportunities to interact with different people through this land. When you land on spots that have these book icons, you will turn to those pages in this leads book, and you will be able to have complex encounters with those people. You can do different kinds of stat tests. And as you pass or fail those, you will gain these clues. And there's a little bit of set collection here because you can earn 3 clues that have the same icon. And so in this instance here, it would be a squirrel's skull, a squirrel's paw, and a squirrel's tail. All of those have the same icon. So if you get if you get 3 of the same type of clue, then you get to do a special resolution where you might have a little bit different path through the end part of the game. Or you can find 3 different clues. And if you get 3 different clues, you will take those clues back to the constable here in the city, and then they will point you in the direction to finish off the game. And before that point, you are in one phase of the game. And then after you find all of your clues, you go to this second phase of the game, and that's called Across the Border. And that's where things start getting a little weird. At the beginning of the game, during combat encounters, you're going to be fighting off against basically your kind of humans, dogs, animals, harlots, and more mundane type of encounters. But once you cross the border and go into the weirder second half of the game, the things you will be fighting are a little more fantastic. We have some fairies and some weird men of claws, some ancestors, this interesting horned old woman, the Gorastas, the dire crows. So things change and become a little more supernatural. And I think that's really cool. And so I have played through the game 3 times. And I don't feel like I have seen everything yet. This is not a game of infinite possibilities. Eventually, you will see all of the stories in the leads. And as you interact with the different characters with the leads, sometimes they will send you on very detailed side quests that create their own little short story within the overall epic scope of the murder mystery story. And you will also be having interactions you will have intelligent encounters. So if you want to test your intelligence, you can have encounters with different types of people trying to pass locks, trying to solve riddles and that kind of thing. And you can also have charisma encounters. And so there you can use your charisma encounters. And so you often have an opportunity to choose which kind of encounter you are going to have. On certain tiles, there will be these icons, a heart, a light bulb, and crossing swords. Each one of those represents a certain kind of encounter that you can choose to have. And you have to have an encounter in each tile, in each space, to consider that space explored. And so when you move into a new space, you choose the type of encounter you want to have. Here you can have a charismatic encounter, an intelligence encounter, or a combat encounter. So there is quite a bit of choice in how you wish to engage with the game. And while you are engaging with the game, I think it's really important to note, this is a really important fact. I should have spoken about this earlier, but the age limit on this game says 16 plus. And I think this is one of the few games that I really do believe that kids should not play. This is a maturely themed game. There are elements of violence. There are gruesome violence. There is drugs. There is drinking. There is crude language. In the last game that I played, I was playing as Mara here. I was actually sexually assaulted on one of the cards, and it came out of the blue. And I thought, wow, okay, that doesn't bother me so much because I know what kind of game this is. It is a mature game. If this game was a movie, it would be a hard R game or hard R movie. But I could see some people having issues with that. So just know that going in, that there are some things that some people may find offensive. And it's just kind of up to you how you choose to deal with those things. But I wanted to give you a little bit of an example of the kinds of things that happened to my character on my last game. And then we'll talk about a little bit of some of the flaws that I perceive in this game. And then maybe we'll do a couple sample turns where I can kind of show you how the game plays. So characters, let's talk about characters first. There are quite a few characters, and they all kind of play differently. And I should say also that I think this game really is just a solo game. I can't really imagine playing this game with other players, maybe one other person, but there are a couple of reasons why I think this game is solo only. One, it allows you to really get into the story and connect the dots to the things that's happening to your character. Two, the game plays perfectly true solo lone wolf mode. You shouldn't even two-hand a hero in this game. So choosing one character is, I think, the best way to play solo, and it works super well. Everything scales perfectly, and there are no issues whatsoever. And I can also see there are some times where there could be some downtime. Now, the other players, if you play solo, they're supposed to control the creatures while you are playing, so there really isn't that much downtime, but the turns can still be pretty long. Also, if you play solo, it kind of spreads out the narrative to more games. If you played this game with 3 or 4 players, you would see a lot of the story, a lot of the different things that could happen in a single game. And so for me, this is fully a solo game. And I think this is a game, a perfect kind of game where I want to play this once a year. And in that sense, I kind of put that in the same category as Big Trouble in Little China. It has that feel where eventually you are just going to see all of the combinations that this game can throw at you. So spreading it out to a once a year game, kind of a special occasion game, I think is the best way. And as a solo game, I think that's the best way to enjoy Arcadia Tenebra. But let's take a little bit of an example of some of the things that happened to me. So one of the things that happened to me is I drew this lucky. So there are lucky cards and unlucky cards. The luckies tend to be good things that happen to you, and the unluckies tend to be bad things that happen to you. But that isn't always the case. It's not a simple binary good, bad. When you succeed in something, you get to draw a lucky card, and there are quite a few different luckies. And the luckies, these can be events, these can be items, these can be side quests, these can be encounters, they can be weapons and armor and hirelings. These can be all kinds of different things that you can encounter, and you get to draw one of these whenever you roll a successful test. I think that's really cool. Whenever you fail a test, you will draw an unlucky. And again, unluckies can be, they can be allies, they can be events, they can be items, they can be all of the things in the luckies, but they usually have 1 or 2 bad elements. And it's almost like a trade-off. However, some of the unluckies I found were actually pretty cool, and I actually ended up using them. And with the unluckies get equipped automatically. You don't have a choice. And so if you found an unlucky weapon and you already had a weapon equipped with your character, you would have to equip that unlucky, put your old weapon in the backpack. And then usually to get rid of an unlucky, you have to go on some kind of little side quest. And sometimes when you get the luckies, you will actually have to go on a little quest before you can actually equip that item. Very similar to how you have to go on a quest to actually find the item, to equip the item in Gloom of Kilforth and Shadows of Kilforth. And I think that's a really interesting system. It adds an element of investment, of investing into the story of that item. And I think that's really cool. But let's take a look at some of the things that happened to me on my adventure, and you can kind of get an idea of where this game is existing, what kind of space this game is existing in. So I found this lucky, and it was the illusionist. I'm going to read this to you. A famous illusionist gives a show in a hotel. After the show, you offer him a drink, curious to learn how he ended up here and how his countess is doing. You learn that the Countess couldn't stand the mountain climate and returned to her mother, after which she apparently fell off a horse and ended up in a wheelchair. And so I'm wandering around Monarchy doing tricks and drinking whenever I can't get morphine. He drains a shot of Green Witch and orders another one. Yes, it's our punishment because we fucked up the heir to the throne. Guy simply didn't deserve it. Silence. I hear you're not wasting your time here. Take this. Drink it to fall into catatonic sleep that will persuade your enemies that you're dead. He gives you a bottle of dark, dense liquid. Now you get a dark liquid, and you can drink this liquid to bypass a combat encounter for you to have a successfully explored tile without having to have a combat encounter. That was a short little story here just to get a potion. So that's the kind of narrative that this game is creating every time you draw a card. And all of these are drawn at random. Now, sometimes the stories that cards tell you, there is a thematic disconnect with your character or what is actually going on. That's where one of the flaws of this gem becomes apparent. Because my character here, I was playing as Mara. And she is she's kind of a sorcerer. She can heal. She can summon a hornet swarm. She can summon a stone shield. But she is Mother Nature's daughter, and she doesn't use metal weapons except for things created by Tesla. So she doesn't use metal weapons. And one flaw there is the weapons that you find, they don't tell you if they're made of metal. So you kind of have to come to some of that determination. And two, in one of the encounters I had, it said that I poked at something with my saber. Well, Mara wouldn't have a saber because sabers are made of metal. I guess maybe it was a ceramic saber, but I don't think they had ceramic blades back then. I don't know. Yeah, so sometimes there is a thematic disconnect, and that does crop up with the randomness. However, sometimes the randomness works wonders and you have those really cool serendipitous moments. And I'm going to show you one here. So this was a card that I drew right at the beginning of the game. I was in the first tile. It is a lucky. I had a successful test, and so I drew my lucky, and I found these 7 league boots. And so this says that the gypsy caravan camp at the city outskirts, which I was here at the city, and there's this gypsy camp here right at the city outskirts. So this all lined up here. That was really cool. You attend their evening show and get impressed with the gypsy boys' impalement arts. The boys' white boots are decorated with tiny horsehair braids. They seem like a must-have piece. You give the boy a good bargain, but he declines. Bro, these are the 7 league boots. I inherited them from my grandpa and cannot sell them. You wait until all the gypsies are asleep, sneak in, and steal the boots. I gave him an excellent offer, but he declined. You mumble into the chilly night air, justifying yourself. So I stole these boots from this gypsy kid, and they gave me some bonuses, so I equipped them as a garment. It's really important to know that your characters in this game, they are not heroes. They are anti-heroes. They are ne'er-do-wells. They are just trying to scrape by. And so don't play this game as if you are a hero. And so on my next turn, I kind of maybe foolishly, this was bad role playing. I will talk about the role playing element in a bit, but I went into the gypsy camp. I moved into the gypsy camp and I had an encounter and I failed my test. So I had to draw an unlucky. Here's the unlucky I drew. The Black Widower. The inner side of this chest armor is covered in tiny needles, a fact you've realized only after the gypsies squeezed you into it. This is for the boots, you asshole. Now get lost before we cut your throat, you stealing scum. You claim you have no idea what they are talking about, but it's obvious you will have to settle the debt if you want to take off this armor. Black Widower is soaked in some wicked herbs that sting and make you go on rampages comprising howling and heedless frantic running, which draw your strength, but may be of use in combat. Out of combat, you have to use all of your power to restrain yourself. So this is an unlucky. I had to replace my boots that I had stolen and equip this Black Widower, and it kind of gave me some detriments. However, there was one way that I could remove this, and I had to go on a quest to settle my debt. And I had to travel to the gypsy camp where I already was and pay 1. So I had to pay 1. I had these boots in my backpack. There is no currency in this game. The currency is all the items that you don't want. So if you don't want an item, you can use that to pay for other things. Really a really cool system. But I wanted these boots. So I went off and I found another item. I went back to the gypsy camp and I paid them to remove the Black Widower from me. And then I was able to steal the boot, to equip the boots that I had previously stolen from the kid. That was a really cool little serendipitous adventure that happened all because of randomness. And the stories connected, the locations connected, everything connected perfectly. So sometimes the game is flawed. Sometimes it's a gem. That's why it's a flawed gem. But eventually I found some steampunk leather, a leather body glove. I had a successful encounter in another location where Vladislav joined me as an ally. I found this bird, Bubo, who he could have joined me as an ally, but you can only have one ally. But to in order to really find this bird, I had to go on a quest. So I drew this card. It's a lucky, and it was a quest. And once I'm across the border, so once I get to that second stage of the game, I can find the Winged Majesty. And I have to go down here to a location in the south called the Stechek Circle. And if I go there, then I can actually find the bird and rescue the bird, and the bird would become my ally. I found a hidden compartment in a tombstone that I was able to find some things that Tesla might need. So I was actually able to trade the things that I found here for one of Tesla's prototypes. And so there is a deck of cards called Tesla's Prototypes. And these are all items that Tesla has created. And you're going to want to try to get some of these either by finding them at random throughout having little adventures, or going up to Tesla's laboratory and interacting with him as a lead for that for the main quest. And once you do that, you can unlock his deck of prototypes that you can gain and equip. And these are very powerful items that will help you with some of the boss fights, because as you progress through the game, there are some boss fights. I found an electrocycle, kind of a steampunk motorcycle, but I wasn't able to repair it, so I just had to keep it as an item that I could trade. And then I found a few other trinkets and a priest's bag, which is a special card. There are a deck of special cards, and these are predefined cards that the narrative will tell you to draw at certain points, depending on whether or not you have met those conditions. And so those will be usually tied to the side stories in the leads book. So when you go to one of the spaces that has the book marker on it, and you have one of those leads, let's say here, I don't know, let's go to 41 here. Let's go to, 41 is Wolf's Head, I think. I know it's 5. So 5 is the tavern here in the main city. This is often the first kind of lead that most players will have because it's in the starting square. And so you can go into Wolf's Head. You can read about interacting with the innkeep, and then you can make a choice. So you can take a strength test, an intelligence test, or a charisma test. And depending whether or not you pass the test, you will either go to the fail or the success section. If you go to the success section, you will often unlock new things that you can do in those locations. You will gain clues, and then you will often have the ability to do that person a favor. Basically, they send you on a side quest, and often those side quests will have maybe 2 to 4 subsequent parts, and sometimes they will branch, and you don't have to do those side quests, but they will often lead you to discovering some of those special cards. And so I think that is pretty cool. Let's take a little look at the characters and talk about passing tests. Passing tests is pretty easy. In combat, it's all a d20 and it's all a target number. You're trying to hit the target number or above. You will have bonuses to your rolls. So these stats up here are all of your combat stats. This is how many attacks you can take on a turn from 0 to 5. This is your bonus from a -5 to a +5, and you add that to your d20 roll for combat. And each of the heroes or each of the characters and the combatants, the monsters, or the creatures will have a hardiness, and that's the target number that you need to hit or that they need to hit in order to do damage. And then you can keep track of your damage bonus here. And then we have these skills here are used for stat checks. We have power, which is your health as well as your strength. We have intelligence and we have charisma. And each of the characters will have a different starting value for each of those stats. And the way that intelligence and the way that stat tests work is if I were to draw this card here, which is an intelligence 12 test, I take that as the target number, but I look at my intelligence. My intelligence is 16. The target number is 12. If my intelligence is over the target number, I get a bonus, and you just subtract the two numbers, and that's your bonus. If your stat is under, then you subtract it, and you take a negative bonus. So 16 minus 12 is a plus 4. So I would need to get an 8 or higher to pass that intelligence test. And hey, I got a 20. 19 and 20 rolls, those always count as successes, and they will give you a hard success or a strong success or critical. They start as criticals. 19 is kind of a weak critical. 20 is a strong critical. And the same applies for 1s and 2s. 1s is a very hard critical fail, and a 2 is a soft critical fail, and those will often have you damaging yourself when you roll those. But the characters are all really different. I've played the game with 3 different characters, and I've had pretty different experiences, and a lot of that has to do with their special powers. So we have Mara there, we have Oscar Uzangulu, Ricardo Morin, Jaibir Ibn Yazio, or Yazid, I should say, Yazid, Hilda von Bluestein, Aiden Bahur, and Klaus Croy. This character is actually androgynous, so she can take the form of a male or female, and depending on who she is interacting with, that might change. I think that's pretty cool. We have Rod Tesla, Nicola's, I think, cousin or something. On the back here, we have some very detailed stories about the characters, their appearance, their personality, and even their religion and spirituality. We have Broken Ivan and Delara Tilke and Mina Coco Kinski. So those are all of the characters. And again, none of these characters are really heroes. They're all kind of anti-heroes at best. When you fight a creature, you will take one of the creature boards and you will place the creature on the card there. And then you will set up their stats using these little paper tokens for power, for damage, attack, and for their bonus rolls. This is another area where the kind of indie roots, indie design, indie production comes through, because to keep track of your character's stats, you use these little cardboard tokens, and you just kind of put those on the track and move them up or down. It is very easy to bump these things and lose track. So so that's just, if a game had more money to throw at their production, these would probably be cubes in recessed spaces or something like that. So again, just a little indie quirk of this game. Luckily, you don't have to punch these out. All of these come pre-punched. And I don't know if the designers had to do that. I do know that they hand-packed all of their boxes, because I actually had a little thank you card in my box. So my box was hand-packed, and there is this little thank you card in the box. And I don't even think these are shrink wrapped. So that's kind of how indie it is. I mean, I could even entertain the notion that this game would not be sold in a box, that all the stuff would just come in a bag or something like that. But I'm really happy that this game exists, even in the state that it's in. Some of the other flaws come in the rulebook, and in some of the writing on the cards in the story. And I think that has to do with, 1, it's translated, and 2, it's just a little rough around the edges. Some of the rules are a little rough, hard to understand. There are a lot of edge cases. One of the things that this game tells you a few times in the rules is it tries to convey the fact that this is an RPG. And the other day, Alan from Perplexing Ruins and we got together on Discord, and we had a chat about these kinds of games, about how a lot of the games that we enjoy and a lot of the games that I cover on the Dungeon Dive are kind of in this in-between space. They are role RPGs with a lot of components, or they are board games with RPG elements. And often those are the kinds of games that I love. But there are differences. There are differences. Board games give you direct direction. Board games give you a definitive beginning, middle, and end. Board games limit the interaction. They limit what the players can do. And some board games really try, and with various degrees of success, they try to push themselves into the realms of being more of an RPG, having more RPG elements. And often that comes at the price of definitive rules. And so there are a few times in this book where this says that this is an RPG. If you're unclear on how to do something, role play it. And in a lot of games, I would kind of roll my eyes at that and look at that as being just kind of this game trying to have its cake and eat it too. The designer's saying like, well, we can't really determine what you're supposed to do in this situation, so just role play it. But with Arcadia Tenebra, I think that kind of works. And I think if you approach this game more as an RPG, think of this as the Fallen RPG made by Perplexing Ruins. And I know that Melv Lee, one of the another creator on YouTube, I know he has made kind of a board game version of Fallen. And this does kind of remind me of that. It's kind of a complex board game / RPG. And the more I think of this as an RPG, the more I like it. Some of those choices do come in how you interact with the spaces. You have a choice to do a charisma test, an intelligence test, or a combat test. One of the rules in the game says that if you role play successfully, you can give yourself a +5 bonus to a stat test. And that got me thinking about how I was interacting with the world. Because my character, Mara, let me find my character again. Where did she go? So Mara here, her intelligence is her best stat. Throughout my entire last game, my intelligence was always my top stat. So logically, I could go from space to space, always choosing to have an intelligence encounter, so I had the best chance of passing that test and getting more luckies. Yeah, but I started thinking of it in terms of an RPG. So let's say that I was at the Gypsy camp and I had an unsuccessful intelligence test, and the little story on the card said something like, you were trying to sneak by something and you triggered an alarm, and so some creatures came out and started chasing you. Okay, so I could just take the unlucky and say that encounter's done, move on to the next space, and then just try to have another intelligence check. But to continue that story of that failure, I decided that if I moved down to the dead track, the next encounter would need to be a combat encounter because I needed to fight the thing that was chasing me. Now, that helps me because of a successful role play. I decided to role play the encounter, so that would give me a +5 to my power, which would be a 15, which would allow me to have a better chance of surviving that combat. So I played the game more like a board game, or more like an RPG with a whole bunch of components, and I ended up really liking playing the game like that. I thought it worked really well, and it made me enjoy the game a heck of a lot more. As far as variety goes, again, you are playing through the same story each time you play the game, but there are all of the random elements that happen between the major points of that story. There are a ton of cards, so you have all of these luckies, a huge deck of luckies. You have a huge deck of unluckies, and again, these can be anything from items to side quests to little stories to stat tests. We have a whole bunch of Tesla's prototypes. When you go to the across the border part of the game, we have a deck of creatures to fight. We have intelligence encounters across the border. We have charisma encounters across the border. We have a whole bunch of clues, some special cards. And then we have the regular encounters. Now, I would really like to see more of the regular encounters, especially the intelligence and charisma encounters, because there aren't a lot of those. So do keep that in mind. And the combat encounter deck is separated into level 1 and level 2 encounters. And the level 2s are just a little bit more challenging. So I think there is quite a bit of variety. I don't feel like you're going to see everything that this game has to offer in 5 plays. Any more than that, you might start to see repeated things and you might start to have more of the same experiences. But I think there are enough random elements. I think there are enough things to discover to have quite a bit of replay. And I know that is pretty important to a lot of people, especially in this kind of game. So a typical game will have you play, you will choose one character. And again, I think that's the best way to play. Single player, one character, pure lone wolf mode to really get into that story. And you will start in the city. I'm not going to flesh out my character with all of my stats or anything. We can just pretend. And then you will read the introduction here in the leads. In the leads section, we'll read a little bit about that. For quite some time now, you have been breathing, drinking, eating, and shitting in Arcadia Tenebra, the godforsaken province of the Hungarian-Austrian Empire that borders the Ottoman Empire. The bright side of all is that nature here is beautiful and you enjoy its bucolic tranquility. On the wrong side, you're kind of stuck here. You feel like you're going nowhere. Your days are dragging on pointlessly. So far, all of your decisions have been faulty. It appears that anything you attempt to do fails. So yeah, this game is kind of depressing. There's not a lot of light in this game. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to read this interaction with the constable there, the chief of police, and you will start your main quest, help with the investigation, collect 3 clues, and return to the police chief, and then read page 41. And it tells you where you can search for clues. You can go to clues at Wolf's Head, the Hamlet, the brothel, the laboratory, the sawmill, the tea house, and the other city, or in the spring. And so that kind of gives you some direction of where you want to go. But after that, it's up to you. And then you begin the game by drawing 1 lucky. And what did we find here? So help me God. Okay, so this is a quest. I need to go on this quest in order to unlock the ability to use this trinket. And this says, spending a night beneath the Stechak tombstone, you dream of God with a mechanical beard. You find the dream to be especially disturbing since you have taken no weed, mushrooms, or alcohol the day before. I would like to try the alcohol that gives me dreams like that. I guess maybe some absinthe, but I love absinthe, but I've never had absinthe that strong. Plus, you woke up with a bracelet made of rusty cogwheels with the inscription Deus Ex Machina. Immediately, things go from weird to bad. A giant bear attacks you, beaten down on your knees, feeling your strength ebbing. You raise your bloody face to heaven and cry, "Help me, God." Suddenly, the skies open and a giant mechanical fist appears, crushing the bear into a pulp. Okay, that is quite the experience there. Yeah, this game gets weird. This is definitely a work of weird fiction here. Think of this kind of like City of Chaos in a way, in the way that the story unfolds. It gets dark and twisted. So to really unlock the power of Help Me God, I need to travel to the Stechak Circle, which is down here. And then when I go there, I don't have to have an encounter. For my encounter, I can solve this quest. I can complete this quest, and then I can unlock this trinket. And that's called the Help Me God. I have to have a POW of 8 or lower, or if my health goes down to 8 or lower, get on your knees and cry, "Help me God," gain +2 hardiness, and deal 4 splash damage once per combat. That's pretty cool. That's a neat little side quest to go on. So right away, on my first turn, I can start looking for clues to solve the murder, or I can head down to Stechak Circle and complete the Help Me God side quest. That might be something I want to do. And so we'll have to think about that. So on a turn, you can either stay where you are and you can interact with the space you are on. And the space is the big square, not any small spaces that are in that square. So in these tiles. And here you can go shopping if you have items to trade. At the beginning of the game, the shop is empty and the shop starts getting populated with all of the luckies and unluckies that characters discard while they are playing. And so the shop is kind of constantly expanding. That is one limit to playing solo. this shop does not expand nearly quick enough. So I'm thinking of some kind of house rule where at the beginning of the game, you draw 5 luckies and 5 unluckies to become the shop. I think that could make the shopping a little more interesting in this game. I can go to Wolf's Head and I could interact with the bartender there to start looking for a clue. I can rest at the hotel if I am out of health. But I think it is beneficial to have some kind of interaction on your first tile so you can place one of these little triangles. Again, this is where the game it gets a little fiddly, a little flawed, is as you have encounters on this board, you are placing these little tokens in the corner there. And that shows that you have had that encounter. So you no longer have to have an encounter on this space the next time you move through it. And it's just a way to remind you that you don't have to have an encounter there, but you always can if you choose. Another cool thing about this, though, is when it is your turn to move, you can freely move from one explored tile following the path up to the next unexplored tile. So as you explore the tiles, your ability to move around the land greatly increases. And I think that is very, very cool because one thing I forgot to mention is there is a time limit in this game. You have to solve the game. You have to finish the game within about 20 turns. And the time limit is pretty strict, but it doesn't bother me so much because it does keep me moving. And if you didn't have a time limit, it would be very easy for you to just find every clue and every lead and have every story in a single game. And then you wouldn't really have anything to do on subsequent games. And so the timer in this game really doesn't bother me. I always feel like I have enough time to have a satisfactory adventure. So let's say that I've played for a while and I was down here in the caves and I have explored those and I want to head to the fields here on my movement. So the first part of your turn, you can stay in the spot and have an encounter, or you can move. So I'm going to move from one explored, and I'll move here into the fields. And in the fields here, I can have a charisma encounter, I can have an intelligence encounter, or I can have a combat encounter. Let's have one intelligent encounter here as an example. So I will draw my intelligent encounter. And let's see what happens here. 3 shell game swindlers. One of the youngsters you come across has 3 small matchboxes. Pushing a bean under one of those, he quickly shuffles them. Other boys try to guess where the bean ended. Your rival stops the game. The smallest boy measures you up. Want to play? You successfully locate the bean during a second attempt. Stakes keep growing and your ability to guess decreases. Eventually, you stake your equipment. Sure, you'll be right this time. Pay 2. So you would have to discard 2 items to pay the kid. I don't have 2 items. If you can't pay, kids will accuse you of attempting fraud and call their elder brother to deal with you. Combat the local and the kid gang. Okay, so this would turn into combat here. So I would try to find the local and the kid gang. The kid gang there. Okay, so I would have to try to fight these guys. Now, I love this power on the local. He has a power here called cousin. He calls his cousin. He's like, cousin. And so one of his cousins comes out and joins him in combat. I think that is a really, really cool power for a local to have, to call his cousin for backup. And so now I would have to do combat with 3 characters. Oh my God, this would be really hard. What does the kid gang do? Impress them. Kid gang leaves combat or fights on your side. Pull out your weapon and show them some moves. Oh, interesting. So yeah, I don't know. This is pretty interesting. That was a funny encounter there that turned into something way beyond what I was thinking. But let's say I was able to pay him. If I paid him, then I could discover the fraud. And then I could have an intelligence 13 test. So 13 would be my target number. My intelligence is 16. 16 minus 13 is 3. So I have a plus 3. So I need to get a 10 or higher in order to find the fraud. And I rolled a 6. Okay, so that was a fail. So because I failed, I would have to draw an unlucky. And then I would read the failure here. Fail. You point at an empty box. You lose your possessions since you demonstrated sharpness. Since you've demonstrated sharpness is not your ace. -1 intelligence. My intelligence would go down to 15. And then at the end of my turn, my resolution phase, then I flip my unlucky over. And I found mechanical hands. This is a really funny item here. I've had this item before. So this says that in a dark nook behind Wolf's Head, a bent guy shoves a linen sack into your hands. This is good stuff. Only 99 kronen, he utters hastily, grabbing money from your hands without counting and disappearing in a side alley. You're glad he didn't notice that you gave him only 89 kronen. You turn the sack upside down and mechanical fists drop out, grabbing your leggings, coat, climbing up your body, and eventually clutching your hands. Shoo, scram, you mechanical scum. You shout, trying to get free of their mechanical grips. The only way to get rid of the mechanical hands is to convince Hoderick that he can use them as free workforce. Okay, so this is an unlucky. So I immediately have to equip this in my trinket spot. And at the start of combat, the mechanical hands drop out of the sack and randomly grab you or your opponents. So at the beginning of every combat now, I have to roll a d20 on and do a power or intelligence test of 12. If I pass, they grab my opponent, and my opponent is reduced to a number of attacks to 1. If I fail, they grab me, and then my attack is reduced to a 1. Really a cool item here with a neat little story. And to get rid of it, I now have a quest where I have to travel south to the sawmill, which is just here off of camera, and then have a quest interaction to discard this card. Really a cool little system. So now, just from that one turn, I now have 2 little side quests and some other things that I can do. And yeah, that's basically how the game is played. And you keep wanting to go to your leads, trying to find 3 clues in order to progress to the second phase of the game. And that will usually end in some kind of boss fight in one of these squares with the red crossed swords. And that's usually where your game will end. So yeah, so I hope you enjoyed taking this extended kind of detailed look at the finalized production copy of Arcadia Tenebra, a game that really does represent, that does embody those 2 concepts, and those concepts being the flawed gem and the passion project. And oftentimes those 2 things go hand in hand. There are a lot of passion projects that end up being flawed gems. And I think that's cool. I like that these kinds of games exist. I like that we have the ability to experience a game like this that without alternative methods of getting a game like this produced, we wouldn't have that opportunity. And I think that's really important. And it's these kinds of games here, it's this space that constantly gets me excited about playing games. So, all right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.